now have Delegate Smeagol, and he has served in the House of Delegates for the last 10 years. He is the Vice Chairman of the Eastern Shore Caucus, Chairman of the Maryland House of Delegates Tea Party Caucus, the Chairman of the Cecil County Delegation, the Minority Parliamentarian, a member of the House Judiciary Committee, and Delegate Smeagol represents Cecil, Kent, Queen Anne's, and Caroline counties as a 36th district delegate. Delegate Smeagol has successfully passed legislation which the voters approved, amending the Maryland Constitution. Delegate Smeagol is a former United States Marine, Semper Fi, who has been practicing attorney on the Eastern Shore of Maryland for the last 23 years. So with that, pass the mic down.
Thank you. Can everybody hear this? And first off, I apologize. I've had 2 speeches here today. The second one was much better, but I did not win the $350 million lottery, so you're not going to get to hear that one. From a different attitude. I want to thank both of the previous speakers. They covered some of the material I was going to cover, and so I'll try not to be redundant with those things. With regards to the U.S. versus the Maryland Constitution and how it affects you, I think Delegate Waldstreicher hit it right on the head. The U.S. Constitution, we hold it in very high esteem. It's a blueprint for our republic. It grants certain powers to each of the 3 branches of our government. The Maryland Constitution, I think I said it's a mess. I think were stronger words, and I'd agree with those. It also has the Baltimore City parking regulations in it. It has what I refer to as the Vice Amendment we put in a few years ago, and I sued to try to take it out, and I put legislation to get out the gaming restrictions. We don't need those. They could be in the code easily. It doesn't belong in the Constitution. It was there for political reasons, not for any reason dealing with making our Constitution any better. Similar to the U.S. Constitution, Maryland's Constitution spells out the powers granted to each of the 3 branches of government. And I think that as local government officials, these are the things that I think hopefully you'll take away that will empower you here today. That you need to understand that there are different powers that are granted to the executive and the legislative branches, and they're not always clear. Currently, we're having a lot of discussion about Plan Maryland, the Best Available Technology Septic Regulations, the BAT. The Maryland legislature specifically limited the BAT mandates to the coastal bay and the critical areas. Legislature said, here's where you'll put those. And we'll leave it to the local government officials and their autonomy to decide if they need them somewhere else. But a branch of the executive branch are the agencies, and the secretary of an agency in the executive branch made the decision that even though the state legislature decided, no, I think we could do it through regulation. And so they put in regulations that step on the decision made by the legislative branch. And the regulations do exactly what the legislature said you could not do. They say now we'll put it everywhere, not just in those critical bay areas, and not just in the coastal bay and the critical areas. It's an ultra vires act, ultra vires. It's over and above the power that they have, some of us would argue, for a secretary in the executive branch to set policy. The legislature sets the policy. And so many of you function in both capacities, and that's really much harder because we have a clear delineation. And some of you who are county commissioners sometimes sit in your capacity as a executive, and sometimes you're sitting in the capacity as a legislator. And so it takes some real good guidance from your attorneys who represent you to let you know when you're sitting in those various capacities. But even though the legislative branch says no to something, the executive branch, especially when you're setting policy, should not be able to set regulations to come in and change what was done. Now, what do you, as those who are being held to meet those extra burdens that are being placed on you, how do you deal with that? My suggestion is that you go to the courts. The delegate brought up a great idea with respect to talk about the Attorney General. How many of you know which branch is the Attorney General fall under? Right. Legislature doesn't have its own attorney. We have the executive branch, council, through the Attorney General's office, give us an opinion on whether or not the executive branch or the legislative branch is correct. Normally, you have, you believe it's going to fall the other way. He was much kinder in his, and I agree, it should be informative but not dispositive. I got in trouble, I guess a couple of years ago, when I was asked about the opinion that we had received on something, and it was the Walmart case where they said it was okay to hit Walmart with the health care, and the Attorney General opinion that came to the floor said it was okay, and of course the courts said, no, you can't do that, it's unconstitutional. And when the reporters asked me about it, I think I said there was a vice presidential candidate that was once asked what the vice president, what he thought of it, and he said it wasn't worth a warm bucket of spit. So the opinion, what came out in the paper was, I said Attorney General opinions weren't worth a warm bucket of spit. But I think that the delegate here put it much better. It's informative, but not dispositive. Because usually what you get is what you would ask for, and it almost always lacks the executive. So I would suggest you go to your council. And if you're in a small county and you can't afford to challenge something that's being placed upon you, get many other counties together. You get 10, 12, 14 counties that say these regulations that are coming out of the executive department through an agency and are going to bankrupt our county, whether it's the WIP or the Planned Maryland or it's the regulations with the BAT, you get the attorneys and you go into court and you challenge them and you get them together. That's the only way that you're going to be able to challenge something that is an act that is over and above the power of those secretaries when they put this through in regulation.